Good afternoon and welcome everybody. Great pleasure to be here today to talk to you about the line and also about NEOM, which is an incredible vision by His Royal Highness that was announced several years ago. Today is about bringing visions to reality. I'll give you a snapshot of where we are. The line is an incredible vision. You know, it's an aspirational and an innovative thing that we are still working through. So we're just going to give you a snapshot on where we are on that vision to reality journey. And then I'll give you a bit of an overview just about where we're at, and then we have a panel discussion about some of the complexities we're facing, just to put that into context. The first thing is, everywhere I go, people say to me, can you talk to me about the line? And I say to them all the time, to understand the line, you really need to understand NEOM, and to understand NEOM, you need to understand the Vision 2030 for the kingdom. And so we are a part of that 2030 vision, which is a very bold, aspirational piece of guidance delivered by His Royal Highness back in 2017. It really sets the foundation for change here that I'm sure everybody is feeling. It's an incredible time to be here for me in Saudi Arabia. It's amazing people, and the energy and the change that's happening is really amazing. So we are part of 2030 Vision Strategy. NEOM is at the centre point of that. And really, when you think about it, often say Saudi Arabia in 2000 had a population of 21 million people. By 2023, the population was 36 million. That's nearly 70% growth. By 2040, it's going to be 50 million. So as the kingdom opens up, as we start to engage more with the rest of the world, as we start to get greater foreign direct investment here, greater partnerships, as population grows, where does the growth happen in the kingdom? Makes logical sense to open up a new part of this kingdom in the Saudi Arabia. Hence, that's why NEOM was created. If you are going to create a new place, then what's the purpose? Are we just going to create a city that's been done before, a region that's done before? And His Royal Highness saw this as an opportunity to really break the rules and to really theme NEOM. And as you can see here on the vision statement, it is designed to be a land of the future. It's designed to be for the people of the world, not just for the people of the region. And everything that we do is guided back to this vision statement. So that's what we're trying to do. And everything then says, right, if this is our vision and this is what's happening in the kingdom, where does NEOM and hence the line play a role in changing the world? And that's our mandate. So when you come here, it is about NEOM is a territory the size of Belgium, or in US context, the size of Massachusetts. It's 26,500 square kilometres. It's not a giga project, it's a territory within the country. It's massive. It is about building an economy for 100 plus years. So we have a huge focus on these 15 sectors, and we have people who lead these sectors and drive the partnerships and the innovation across all of NEOM. And that's really what we're doing. The line and the real estate then becomes the enabler for how NEOM is delivered and created into the world. So when we look at the line, I've been told I've just got to wait for a second. Maybe not. So cities have been growing since the mid-1800s. In 1850, the biggest city in the world was London with just on 2 million people. The next biggest city was Paris at about 750. By 2020, there are 275 cities in the world with more than 2 million people. 75 cities in the world with more than 9 million people. So cities have been growing. They've been amazing economic engines of growth, but they've had massive byproducts. And those byproducts we all understand. So there has to be a better model. What is the model? If we look in parts of cities around this region, we just see the same model being delivered everywhere. And by definition of insanity, you get the same results. And I keep coming back. The line is the brainchild of His Royal Highness. And he saw this as an opportunity to change this. And he said that we need to change the way cities are made. For the next 100, 200 years, we can't keep rolling this out. So, really, from our perspective, he gave us a challenge and said, I want you to master plan a city for 9 million people. 9 million people, Riyadh is close to 7. New York City is 9 million people. Greater London is 9 million people. So we had to master plan a city for 9 million people that had no cars, had to be wholly sustainable, etc. So the brief for what we're doing is incredible. And we had to do it all around livability. It had to be the most remarkable place to live. How do you change the world, redefine what we're doing, and be the most amazing place to be? And really, that's where the line came in its genesis. Just quickly, there are 3 things that make the line unique. First, it's linear. Second, it's vertical. And third, it's vibrant, by definition of the first 2. So let's just go here. On the first one, most cities have been done in a radius. They've evolved over time. They've been done in a circle. Urban planning has been just in time, and they've just evolved. Linear cities was really pioneered in the 1800s. It was parked because the technology wasn't there, but we have picked that linear city strategy up and basically converted it to NEOM. If we look at Manhattan, Manhattan is a linear city. For those people who have been to Manhattan, it's 13 kilometres long, 23 kilometres long, 3 kilometres wide. Nearly 2 million people live on that island, and it works really well. And it works well because of a grid system. And the grid system of Manhattan is what we've used for the foundation of the line. Instead of being 3 kilometres wide, we're 1.2 kilometres wide. But then we fold the city up, and it becomes 500 in the air, 200 at the base. And you create 2 blades that look into each other and form a canyon in the middle, and on the outside you look out. It's a very bold way to design a city, but it's very logical. And what that means is you end up with an urban outcome that delivers things that other cities can't do. Hyperproximity, density, vibrancy, which you see here, is that all of a sudden where things are 1.5 kilometres away, they're now 200 metres away. And your ability to have 3-dimensional space inside the line is, something that's never been seen. We have a booth here. We have some 3D goggles and some immersion rooms. If you take the time to go and have a look, the team have done an amazing job, and we will continue to do more of this. But some images of where we're at the moment in our design process. You can see here, these are some of the renders inside of the design. This is looking inside between the 2 blades of that canyon. That canyon is 140 metres apart, which is more than a soccer pitch, in terms of width, and it looks into each other. It's remarkable in terms of the space that's created inside the line. And they have layers that go with the line. The team can talk about that in a minute. But again, just some of this imagery of where we're at in the design process, and forms the nucleus of our next phase. Obviously, the line gives us some certain outcomes, as you can see here, much less land use. It's a very innovative and a much friendly thing for the world in terms of how the city interacts with nature and the environment and integrates. The line's built in modules. You've seen probably some things in the paper saying the line's been scaled back. I can tell you it hasn't been scaled back. It is 170 kilometres long. Its 9 million population is the target date. It will be built in phases. And phase 1 will be centred around the hidden marina. And we will launch phase 1 to the world in 2005 when we have more detail. But it's built in phases, and as you can see on these modules. It's 500 metres high, constant, and as the ground rises, the structure becomes smaller as it disappears into the mountain and then comes out of the top. Just setting this up, you've got to, again, think of the line as a city. So as a comparison, again, against New York City, NEOM is the equivalent of the state. New York State is NEOM. Within New York State, you have New York City, which is the line. Within the line, you have the main city, the part of Midtown, which will be our first phase of hidden marina. Then within the hidden marina, you start to have neighbourhoods. And then within neighbourhoods, you have assets. So there is a whole city structure to how we are designing the line, and the team will talk about this in a minute. But to put it into some context, this is one module overlaid on Central Park. Central Park, for the people, it is 900 metres long. So this is 800 metres, basically the size of Central Park, up 500 metres, and that is one module. We will be building multiple modules in our first phase. What the one module, just on this first module, is about 5 million square metres, which is very big. If you look at the Burj Khalifa, it's around about 400,000. So you start looking in size of what we're doing here. If you look at this again, there is then an asset program that sits in this as a city. And the assets start to come together and they become very diverse. And Tarek and the team will talk about that in a minute. But as you can see, the city's then built up of neighbourhoods. And whether that consists of retail, of residential, of healthcare, of hospitality, of schools, this is everything that a city will have, is all embedded within this design structure. And finally, we then look at a module like this and break it into neighbourhoods. Again, not dissimilar than New York, where you've got Tribeca, or you've got Soho, or you've got Chelsea. Each module will have neighbourhoods, and architects' teams will design and work with each neighbourhood. And then what happens is, how do you coordinate this, and how does all of this come together? This one module is the biggest thing that's ever been built in the world in terms of occupied structure, just one. This challenge has never been done before, so we are pioneering and creating a new way of thinking about how things are done. And it's all happening now. So we're busy on site as we speak. We are doing the earthworks around the hidden marina. We have excavated about 100 million cubic metres of soil as we create our marina. We have tens of thousands of people. We have construction rigs driving piles, as you can see here. We have over 40,000 people working in NEOM doing all of the construction, and we are well into it. So what we're doing at the moment is the excavation, laying all the foundations, and then in 2025 we'll be laying the slab and starting to build ourselves up. But it's incredibly complex, and you need to understand that before you really understand the panel. And our panel, our head designer, the chief designer for the line, will walk you through who our city design, architect and engineering firms are, and what are some of the challenges they're facing to bring this dream into reality. So introduce Tarek Qaddumi.
Good to see everybody here, and thanks for coming out. It's called The Future of Living, and I can't think of anything else that kind of drives this idea further and more into the future than what we're doing in the line. Just to give you some context, in terms of design and in terms of planning NEOM and the line, we started out by planning all of NEOM. It was what we called the regional plan of NEOM. And in that regional plan was an intent to come up with a new form of cities. And that was when the idea of preserving 95% of NEOM and building a linear city that sits on 2% of the footprint of other traditional cities in the world. Later on, we started working on the feasibility of a vertical city and what that meant. A vertical city, as Denis explained, is not a city that is made up of just very tall 500-meter buildings. It is, in fact, multiple layers. So you have the city sitting at 0 level, 150 meters up in the air, 250, 350, and 450, meaning you could be living on the 350 neighborhood, and then you'd visit your friend or family that lives on the 450, and they live on multiple levels of this city. Once that regional plan and the initial master plan were designed by Morphosis architects, now we're looking at the next level of detail, and we're looking at the detail of first phase of the line. As you can imagine, we get into the structure, the utilities, the urban design, the assets, the neighborhoods, and so on and so on. And with me today is an incredible group, a partnership that we've put together between DMAA, the urban designer, who has been responsible for the concept master plan of phase 1 and is now almost halfway through the detailed master planning of that. And from DMAA, we have with us today partner Martin Josst. Once the urban design is created, and once you have that vision and idea, and once they're looking at things like microclimate and movement and mobility and security, we need somebody to hold this city together, to establish the planning principles, the planning rules, to allow for next generation of neighborhood designers to come in and for asset designers to come in. And that, we brought in the largest company in the world in terms of architecture, Gensler. And from there, we have Mr. Ian Mulcahey. We're going to talk about the complexity of everything that we do, and we're going to talk about how that complexity is driving innovation or innovation driving complexity. And there are things that we don't see in a city but are fundamental. It's all the structure, the utility, and the fundamental systems that happen in a city. And with that, we have Mont MacDonald, and from there we have James Medling. Please introduce him. Thank you. I just wanted to start by saying that, and I've been on the line for about 5 years or so, a lot of people look at the line and think, you know, it's something that looks crazy, something that is just way ambitious. But in fact, the line could not be more logical. The line is a logical outcome of a process of innovation. When you want to innovate something, when you want to think of what a new city would look like, what the city of the future would truly look like, you almost have to do away with everything that you know of traditional cities. And Denis described the problems of traditional cities. For one, we've all been experiencing traffic. We've all been experiencing pollution, isolation in cities of today. And they're only getting larger, whereas cities were meant to bring people together. Cities were meant to bring people closer. They were meant to have businesses collaborate better. They were meant to have culture and education and research thrive because of that proximity. And yet all we've done now is just sprawl. And so what you do when you innovate is that you put away the old model and you go back to first principles. And you say, what is it that I'm really trying to achieve with a city? And what we're trying to achieve is 3 things. We're trying to achieve the preservation of nature. We know that by 2050, our cities will grow and expand and take up nature equivalent of Italy, France, and Germany combined. That's how fast we're taking up land and taking up nature. So we want to make sure that the first thing we do is stop that and build more sustainable cities. The second is, like I said, cities with the size that they're becoming are no longer fit for purpose. They don't bring us together like they were meant to be. And so livability, and the best livability for people, is the second most essential thing. And third, we know that cities are meant for economic prosperity. Otherwise, we would all live in villages. They're meant to bring the best industries and create the best synergies between the different companies and the different firms and the research institutions and the education and so on and so forth. So these are our 3 principles, and that's where we started. And the product was what it was. We thought these 3 principles and then brought a new city version 2.0 to the world. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. I want to frame the conversation today with my panelists about 3 parts. I want to get a little bit more into the detail, and I want to talk to the urban designer, the city planner, and the engineering firm about innovation. What is it truly that we're innovating? I want to talk about the digital technology that we're using both in design and in the city. And finally, I want to talk about legacy. What is it that this city will give the world in terms of learnings and in terms of a new model for living? And we use the example of NASA often. NASA gave us GPS, gave us Velcro, gave us a lot of things that came out from that mission to the moon. And once again, please, thank you for coming, everybody. And with that introduction, no pressure. Martin, you've been with us for a while, and you actually were part of the effort that was looking at the feasibility of vertical cities. And you had a scheme, and with that, you've continued to work with us on the phase 1, which is now done with the concept master plan into the detailed master plan.
Right.
And one thing that we know, and I'll put up a couple of just images that I think will explain, again, the size. This is 3 modules, as an example, along the Champs-Élysées from the Arc de Triomphe to the Louvre. And we look at part of the line here that shows all the different neighborhoods. Each one of these neighborhoods, roughly around 400,000 to 500,000. So the size is immense, the complexity is immense, but then I want to talk about the innovation inside that. If you could take a couple of minutes and explain to us how this city is truly innovative from an urban design perspective.
Thanks, Tarek. No, sure. I think from the master planning perspective, truly the third dimension that is added to the city is one of the innovations we are carrying on. We saw on the previous slides already how complex the city is in these 3 dimensions. What we're trying to establish is a structure, a system that allows, on the one hand side, adaptability, flexibility inside the city for future growth. So how can the city change? How can it adapt to reactions? How can it adapt to things that change in the future? But on the other hand also, how can I keep identity? You showed the anchor assets we have. We have culture, we have strong retail, we have enormous entertainment inside the city. And all this combination of flexibility and strong identity, we're trying to establish a kind of digital model that is handling this. From the master planning perspective, again, the 3-dimensionality of the city is quite amazing. You have this multi-layered of public realm, highest diversity, and for me it's still thrilling that you have floating villages on top of retail boulevards. You have cultural assets that are meandering down into sports areas. Imagine, you showed the stadium in one of these slides, when the people, the fans we just discussed, coming from different parts of the city, you can see this, you have a different perspective inside the city. You're not only on 2D plane, you're not blocked by buildings, you can look up, you can see in all directions. And this is still giving a bit of goosebumps feeling, and I hope you had the same feeling wearing the goggles today, a bit being inside. But really innovative, and Dennis showed it also on the slide. You can all experience this within a 2, 3, 4, 5-minute walk. So the city is really based on this human walkability, no cars. It's just made for human experience, walking. And I think this is quite interesting. What we did then is, how can we prove, let's say, if an asset is in the right position? How are the assets set to each other? And of course, in the architectural model, it's not so much new that you can play with parameters in size and scale and so on. But what is, I think, quite interesting, and we have this large group of colleagues with me, and there are much more colleagues working with us on this, is to that we're looking how the people moving not only from A to B on demand, we're looking how they really behave. So we have kind of digital agents we can put in the model and see by the age, by the income, single, family, how they behave inside the city. And each kind of adaptation we do, and also for the neighborhoods in the future, we can provide, I think, a quite strong tool for them to prove the decisions they are doing on human behavior simulation. And this is quite innovative, I think, and strong.
That's amazing. I mean, it is a great reminder for us that it's a city of 9 million people without cars. And that's one of the, probably the best learnings that we're going to come out of with this city. Ian, you worked with Morphosis and AECOM on the master planning of the 170 city before joining us and working with us again on phase 1. from a planning perspective, and I know your passion for planning and city making as you lead the city effort at Gensler, what does that feel like to you?
There's so many innovations in this project. There's so many things that are different. Fundamentally, the biggest difference is, as city planners, we tend to plan backwards, weirdly. We tend to be in a situation where we're solving the problem of an existing city rather than building or designing the new city. The giant innovation here is we get a moment in history to actually plan forward, to actually think about what the city of the future could or should be like. We're actually in a situation where most of the residents of the city haven't actually been born yet. So we're thinking ahead about how are they going to live, how are they going to experience a city of the future, a city with no cars, a city in this extraordinary landscape, and a landscape that we actually don't just preserve, but actually we can access in a way we've never been able to access or experience. I think back to my own city, my home city of London, and Denis referred to it earlier, a city actually that grew for almost 2,000 years before we actually created a planning system at all. And that's common to most of the world's great cities. They've actually evolved over time. We've threaded through sewers and water mains. We've threaded through power. We've threaded through roads with cars and congested our streets with cars. We've actually threaded through trains and undergrounds into those cities with huge complexity to that over time. Here, we're actually planning and thinking about all that urban infrastructure before the first resident moves in, and that's very innovative.
Ian, I'm going to challenge you a little bit and make it more interesting for the audience. Both you and Martin are talking positively. However, we know how difficult it is. This is a never-been-done design before. This is Cities 2.0. It comes with challenges.
Yeah.
I mean, we have sleepless nights, right?
Yeah.
So what is coming our way in terms of challenges? Because if
Probably
we're doing something new...
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest things for me as a city planner, we tend to plan in two dimensions. We plan the ground plane, we plan the streets, and we plan the locations of the buildings. We don't tend to stack the buildings one upon the other. We don't tend to stack use one upon the other. We don't tend to put buildings above parks or parks above buildings. That's where this is extraordinary, that hyperdensity, that layering of different uses and different activities. So what you do at one level affects what happens above, and it affects what happens below. That's the biggest complexity. And this man's had to sort that one out, and we're going to have to now turn that into a city plan.
What I certainly like is the collaborative effort that we've had from the different sides of things.
And the interesting thing is we have the tools now to control the interfaces, and this is making the difference now.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Humankind's never had those tools.
James, you have to make it work. This is a three-dimensional city in the sense that we have a structure that holds a city up as no city has ever done before. So this is some sort of mega structure that's going to hold different ground levels, and then you got to run all the utilities. I mean, it can't be easy.
Yeah, I think, in some ways, it's a well-trodden path. Yeah, we have done all these things in isolation everywhere around the world. If you look at the Burj Khalifa, all the tall buildings that have ever been constructed, we've solved all of these problems before. There is nothing new that we're facing fresh out of the box. And if you look at the complexity of how we develop cities and thread infrastructure through existing cities that have been there for thousands of years, we don't know what's in the ground. We encounter problems on the way. We've got fresh ground here, and we're building vertically. We can see what's there. So in some ways, it's a simplification. But if you take the whole of, say, Sydney Metro or New York Subway or the Elizabeth Line and scrunch it into this complex three-dimensional puzzle of how people want to move and live in that city, and everything then has touch points that are so much closer, more livable, simpler, but incredibly complicated to design and fit together. It's a 3D geometric challenge. And that's what we're working on now.
I mean, you remind me of the analogy that His Royal Highness gave between the Nokia and the iPhone and FII some years ago. And I can't imagine the complexity that went into the design of the iPhone as opposed to the Nokia. However, the result is what we have today, right? So that comes with it.
Absolutely. And at times we have to stop and think, though, are we missing the opportunity to innovate something that's a step change? So are we trying to make a better, brighter candle, or are we making the first electric light bulb and changing the way we live forever? And those opportunities are presented daily on the line. And at times it's having that ambition and bravery, which certainly is matched in the client, in the design team to actually seize and grasp that opportunity.
If I jump to technology for a second, and digital technology, Ian, your team is going to almost take us through the digital twin process of the city, from design all the way to passing it over to the people who build the line, right? And we know that some of this construction has happened already, so there's a lot going on at the same time. But I'd say the digital twin is something that we're going to use today and the city will use in the future. How do you see that working in the line, and what does it do for us?
Yeah, and I think that's, again, a unique position of designing a new city for 9 million people. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years ago, people didn't have that technology. They didn't have those tools. We do have those tools. We need to deploy them, and we need to deploy them in a very, very particular way. We have the ability not just to build this city physically, to build it digitally in parallel. And that parallel model will ultimately be what informs the long-term management, the sale of property, the disposal of property, the refitting of this city. This isn't a building. This isn't a building that after 25, 30 years gets pulled down and replaced. This is a city that will be there for thousands of years. It has to continually evolve. It has to continually adapt. What makes a city is the ideas that were put down on paper, the architectural ideas, the engineering ideas, and the planning ideas. But that's just the start of the journey for a city. What really makes the city are the residents of the city, the people who live in it. They will change it over time. But this technology platform we're creating now is going to be the thing, that oil that fuels that. That's going to be what really enables the city to adapt and change to all the things it needs to adapt and change.
And that's essentially what this is showing, is the adaptability of our city to different uses, and how a hotel will change into a residence building, into an office, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Martin, I know you've been using the digital twin, so to speak, and the technology to test the city, because a lot of things have to be tested, proven. There are a lot of things that you're testing in digital format, and I'll put one of them up here that you're fond of.
Yes, this is showing a little bit this human behavior model. These agents that are running through our geometries, let's say checking if the right amenities are on the right place, is the kind of vibrancy on the right spot where I want it, is the kind of calm spaces and the right spaces where we want it, and these kind of loaded agent based on behavior, they give us a kind of guidance if we are on the right way. But I can also give you another sample. For example, we did this very detailed microclimate study, and we have now millions of data points within the first phase in the model that is telling us in each position of the digital model the temperature, the wind movement, the humidity, but also the daylight. And you can imagine daylight is a quite important factor for all the plants growing. And our landscape architect now developed also a model that is based on this simulation and exactly plugging in all kinds of bioscapes, different plants that are connecting exactly to the results out of this microclimate and daylight analysis. So it's quite an intelligent tool we developed there.
It is super complex, super intelligent. Just to give everybody context, one of the innovative things that we're doing in the line as a city is that we're looking to get rid of the peak cold and peak heat moments throughout the year. So we're looking to kind of shave off some of the heat in the summer months. And with that, you have this complex model that kind of allows you to test it.
And also let's say, the typology of the line. If you look at, we saw it in the animation, typical cities completely exposed to the climate, to the sun. Now we're kind of folding it into the canyon. So we have also the possibility not only to let the nice weather of NEOM inside, but also kind of cool it down a little bit if the heat is too much, and make the public realm usable all days of the year.
Yeah, and with the height, you have extreme wind, and therefore you're using the mirror glass to temper that, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
James, going back to the NASA analogy, Mont McDonald itself is probably looking at this and beginning to make notes on the side, as in, what are we learning here? What systems can be used on other projects? What systems are more efficient? What will the line, as not only a city at the end, but as a design journey, take us through and teach us as a process itself?
Well, it's probably easier to look back. In 5 years' time, if you could ask me that question, I'd be more confident in answering it. But at the moment, design is more complex in this more construed time space that we're working within. So we're having to think deeper than we normally would spatially, but also in time. How's it going to evolve over time? Are we creating a barrier for the future generations' enjoyment of the city? But that's all within existing tools. But then when we start to look at how we coordinate buildings projects, we're not as advanced as some of our colleagues in, say, energy or rail. So we're bringing that technology into buildings for the first time ever that I've seen on this scale, so that we can think deeper, faster, and be more confident that it's going to work. But then when we build it all and it's fantastic and we all have a big party, and people have got to live here, and how do they go about moving through the city? So what we're learning is the data that we're creating now to design the city is going to help people to live in harmony with that city in perpetuity, through it becoming a cognitive, smart city, and having the data and information at people's fingertips to just have a better life. And so I think the legacy of how we use information, how we use data, and how we use more complex systems from other sectors will be for the benefit of every major building project going forwards.
Thanks, James. Any last words, Ian?
Yeah, it's an audacious project, and I think that's what's so exciting to the brains around the world. But the scale of collaboration, the world's best engineers, the world's best designers, world's best landscape architects, all coming together, as you say, like a NASA project to try and achieve the almost unachievable, has been extraordinarily exciting. And we're learning new ways of communicating, new ways of collaborating. We're already channeling that into other projects we're doing, and I think everyone it's accelerated that process that we already knew, but perhaps had never done at this scale. But it's a phenomenally exciting project, and not without its complexities, not without its challenges, but one that I think will see the testament of time, and I think one that the world will want to come and visit when it opens.
I know it gets us up in the morning, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Martin.
No, I'm very curious that we open the door now for the 8 neighborhoods, that the architects coming in, that the master plan get approved, and the next stage is going to be achieved very soon. This is going to be very, very exciting for me.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of NEOM and on behalf of these 3 gentlemen and the great companies that are behind them, and as Martin said, the over 200 other firms that are working on a multiple, diverse range of systems and technologies and everything that you can imagine, environmental, human. I just want to say that we're a group that's super excited with a huge challenge. And on a personal note, I'd love for this to be recorded and to be shown to those who are building future phases of the line, and for for them to laugh at us and say, what technology and what, because the world is evolving. And this is, as Dennis says sometimes, this is Old Town, and we're only at the beginning of a journey, and the line has a long way to go to 9 million people. And this will only repeat again with a new set of people and a new set of technologies, and they'll be up against new challenges. So with that, I just want to thank my panel, thank my partners.
Thank you.
And I look forward to a long journey. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tarek.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.